when I first came to meditation class, I had thought that there must be an advertisement for a meditation class in the Saturday paper. In those days, of course, there was no internet. If you were looking for something, you would look in the newspaper on a Saturday, and there would be advertisements for everything possible. So I guessed there would be an advertisement there for a meditation class, and there was. And there were actually two different meditation centres. One was the other side of town, and one was in the next suburb to where I lived. So I said, okay, that's the one I'm going to go to, because I could walk there. And it was Sri Chinmoy Centre was offering this class. I've never heard of Sri Chinmoy Centre, but that was the one I would go to. I later learned that the centre only ever placed one advertisement in the Saturday newspaper, and that was that day. The day that I thought I would look for the newspaper advertisement, that was the only ad they ever placed. Anyway, so I was going to these Monday night sessions. You could come and go as you please. It wasn't a structured course. You could come 1 week and then disappear like that. So I was very casual about coming along, and very casual in my practice as well. I knew you were supposed to practice every day, but maybe I was practicing 2 or 3 times a week. I don't even remember. Certainly I wasn't very serious about it. So after 6 months of coming and not coming, the leader of the Sri Chinmoy Centre at that time, he phoned me and he said, well, Sri Chinmoy will be phoning our centre from New York this weekend, this Saturday. And all the disciples from around Australia are coming to Canberra for this phone call. Would you like to come to the phone call? Now, this was actually quite an unusual invitation, because when Sri Chinmoy would phone and speak to all the disciples, it was really just for the disciples. It was meant to be just for the disciples, not for someone who just happened to be occasionally coming to meditation classes like I was. But he decided he wanted to invite me. So, of course, I said, well, of course I'll come, to speak on the phone to a spiritual master. Why not? By now I had been starting to read a few of Sri Chinmoy's books, and I was very, very, very impressed. And I've had, incidentally, through the classes, been hearing some of Sri Chinmoy's music, and I also found that very, very moving. And I was really enjoying the music. But I still didn't know much about Sri Chinmoy. But I was invited to this phone call. Now, this was 5 days before my final exam for my music degree. And the final exam takes the form of a recital. So a full, 1.5 hour long recital of classical music solo. So it was a big deal, and something I had to do a lot of time preparing for. So I was practicing probably 8 to 10 hours to 12 hours a day for this recital. But I had time to go, of course, to this phone call. So I came, it was on the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, to the centre where we would meet, and I met all of these lovely people from around Australia. The men were all in their whites, and the women were wearing their beautiful saris, and we meditated. And the time came when Sri Chinmoy was supposed to call, and there was no phone call, so we continued to meditate. And then there were various groups were singing the beautiful songs, and I remember really, it was the first time I'd really been meditating and listening to these beautiful songs sung a cappella, no instruments, no harmonies, just the melodic line in this beautiful Bengali language. And particularly when the women sang, and I was watching them too, and there was a beauty about them that was an unearthly beauty. It wasn't a physical beauty, it was something that I found absolutely mesmerizing, and I was actually staring at them while they were singing. The beauty of the music and the beauty that these women were exuding while they sang was something that really moved me very deeply. And the word that I later discovered is soulfulness, but of course at the time I had no notion of what this word means. But that's what it was. It was the soulful quality about the singing. Anyway, after a few hours, there was some sense in the group, well, what's happening? Because Sri Chinmoy was supposed to phone a few hours ago and he has not. So a phone call was made to New York to one of Sri Chinmoy's assistants to say, well, by the way, we're here. Sri Chinmoy was supposed to phone and he hasn't. What's going on? So this chap ran over to Sri Chinmoy's house and he called us back. No mobile phones, no cell phones in those days, it was just a landline. And he phoned us back in about 20 minutes and he said, oh, Sri Chinmoy apologises, he's so sorry, he forgot. He'll call you back tomorrow night at such and such a time. So then we had some extra time. It was arranged that we would meet again that night, Saturday night, at the new restaurant. There was a new, what we call a Divine Enterprise, a restaurant of Sri Chinmoy's disciples in Canberra, which was to open. And actually this was one of the reasons why he was phoning, was to inaugurate this new restaurant. And he gave it the name Oneness Home. So I came that night to the restaurant, got to meet a lot of the disciples from the other centres, and in a more informal, we weren't just meditating together, now we were eating and chatting, and I remember a few of them really inspired me. I was really taken with particularly Kishore from Melbourne. I remember listening to him speaking about his his passions and what interests him and what he loves about the past. And I was really moved by his light and his inspiration and his energy and his enthusiasm, and also several of the others as well, but Kishore stands out in my memory. So I guess in a subtle way I was getting drawn in. I was being inspired. Then I had to go home and practice the piano, which I did. So the next day, the time, I don't remember what time it was, but the time again was set for the phone call. And again, I was invited. And now everyone else who was there actually knew who I was, because the previous day when I turned up, no one had any idea who I was or what I was doing there. But now I met everyone and they seemed to accept me, and it was okay that I was there. So this time we meditated again, there was more singing, it was beautiful. The phone rang and Sri Chinmoy was indeed on the phone. Now, in those days, there was a what's called a speakerphone. So when the phone rang, the speakerphone button was put on, so immediately everyone in the room could hear what Sri Chinmoy was saying, and he gave a general message which everyone listened to. And then he asked to speak to the disciples one by one. So one by one, the disciples from the various centres approached the phone. They didn't speak through the handpiece, they just spoke into the speakerphone, so that everyone could hear everything, what Sri Chinmoy was saying and what the disciples were saying to Sri Chinmoy. So it was a completely public phone call. And it was beautiful. Everyone approached and they said their name and, if necessary, their centre. And Sri Chinmoy gave each individual a blessing. It was something like, my heart's infinite love and my soul's eternal blessings, something like that. But a little bit different for every individual, and for some individuals there was a specific message that he added as well. And I was loving it. It was this tremendous sense of intensity and intimacy, such as I'd never really experienced. There was clearly a very, very deep and profound connection, and there was an excitement in the room. There was this real anticipation that these disciples were going to speak to their guru, their spiritual master, and it was something very moving to witness. Anyway, so Sri Chinmoy spoke to all the disciples, and then he said something completely unexpected. He said, "Is there anyone else there?" Well, there was. I was there. So the host said, "Yes, there is," and he beckoned me to come over to the phone. So I came over and I realised it's my turn now. I'd just been sitting in the back, minding my own business, like a fly on the wall, but now here I was in the middle of the whole thing, the one next to speak to Sri Chinmoy, the guru. Now, of course, I was completely unprepared for this moment, and I had no idea what you say to a spiritual master. So, but I noticed that everyone else had introduced themselves. So I said, hello, Sri Chinmoy. I said, my name is Mark. That was my name. And I've been coming to meditation classes for 6 months. Silence. To everyone else, he had given a reply, he'd given a message, but he didn't say a word. And I was nonplussed. I mean, I introduced myself, which was apparent. I mean, he had asked if there was anyone else there. I'd come forward, I'd introduced myself, and he was not responding at all. Absolute silence. For it seemed like a long time, and no one else was saying or moving, and there was nothing else happening. Then it occurred to me that he was waiting for me to say something else. But what else could I say? And I guess through my brain there flashed the question, well, what do you say to a spiritual master? And there was only one thing that occurred to me that you might say to a spiritual master. And so I said it. And that was, I would like to become your disciple. It had never occurred to me that I wanted to be a disciple. It had never crossed my mind that this was something I wanted, let alone needed. But I blurted it out. And as soon as I asked that question, there was a long Om. Sri Chinmoy chanted Om and said, I accept you as a true disciple of mine. Whereupon I went back to the back of the room, sat down, and thought to myself, whoa, what just happened? It was completely unexpected. I was completely caught unawares. I had no idea what had just happened to me. Because I didn't really know what it means to be a disciple, or any of the, the way the Sri Chinmoy Centres is structured, or the setup, or what the requirements are, or the lifestyle. I knew some things, but just from observation, no one had ever actually discussed it with me. So here I was, apparently I was a disciple. And just as a follow-up to that, the very next day, I went for a run. Now, I wasn't a runner at all in those days, but for some reason, I think I'd heard the disciples talking about running. I thought, oh yeah, I'll try it, I'll go for a little run. And not far from where I live is an area of natural bushland. So I was running through the bush. You call it forest in Europe. Running through the forest. And all of a sudden, I just felt I was weightless. I was running with the sense that I could actually fly. And there was this sense that a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It just, not only from my shoulders, but it had been evaporated. It didn't exist anymore. It was just gone. And I realized with that feeling, I realized that weight was the responsibility for my life. That whatever I did from now on, wherever I went, whoever I became, it was no longer my responsibility. That I had, and I knew this was directly connected to my becoming a disciple. So mentally I still had no idea what I'd done or what I was doing, but inwardly I got a glimpse of the reality of what it means to be a disciple, which is to have one's entire destiny turned around, and to have the responsibility for one's life assumed and taken over by an infinitely higher and more powerful and wiser and more loving and compassionate consciousness or force. And I have, of course, had no idea how to identify or relate to whatever this force was, other than that it was something really powerful and tremendously good. That's all I could sense at the time, was that I had done something momentous by asking to become a disciple, and that I had entered into not only a new phase of my life, but into a completely new life, a completely new way of being. And of course it would take me many, many years, and I'm still learning what that means. What is this new way of being? What is this new way of life? But at that moment I knew it was absolutely real and absolutely the right thing.
Om